Good morning. My name is Svetlana Burroughs, and today I would like to present my research paper, The Expectation of Morality in the Marketplace. How many of you have ever thought about some type of business, doesn't matter what type, and thought, I expected them to do better? That is because we all expect some type of morality in the marketplace. We expect companies to do things right and do them the right way. What is important about this is that we consumers each have our own understanding of what right or morality means. It is not a fixed value, but lies along a continuum based on our perception. Companies, on the other hand, exist to maximize shareholder value. At least that is what we are learning in our finance classes. But in today's marketplace, they must also do things ethically. So companies are in a position where they must balance the acceptable level of self-interest and social good with the expectation of the marketplace. This leads to my hypothesis. The expectation of the level of the marketplace morality is essential to market identification, penetration, and the existence of business as going concern. Dan Ariely states in his book that everybody cheats, some very small, some a good amount, but everybody cheats. So how do people justify this unethical behavior? The answer in the literature is moral reasoning. Within the framework of moral reasoning are two schools of thought. The first is moral rationalization. Moral rationalization is individual ability to reinterpret or justify his or her immoral actions as moral, especially when there is some type of ambiguity surrounding the morality of the actions in question. Ariely described this ambiguity as the fudge factor. Think of it this way: if you work in a small business where values are highly priced, constantly discussed, and perhaps profit is shared amongst the few workers in the business, then the psychological distance between cheating and the punishment for cheating is small. Theoretically, you might be less likely to steal office supplies, for example. On the other hand, if you work in a large corporation where values are seldom discussed and you simply make a wage and have a large amount of autonomy, then the psychological distance is large and you may be more likely to take office supplies home with you. Still, how do we justify those actions? The first school of thought in moral rationalization is moral disengagement. Moral disengagement is making an action personally and socially acceptable by portraying it as serving socially moral or worthy purposes. Word robbing or buying something with the intent of using it once and returning it is a good example of this. There are many ways to justify the action. It is the same condition when I return it. Or the company makes too much money anyway, or this item is too expensive. We say all of these things to justify in our minds why we perform this unethical action. The second school of thought is moral decoupling, where we selectively dissociate judgments of performance from judgments of morality. For example, we consumers may applaud the performance of Nike as a brand, applaud them for creating performance-enhancing uniform, shoes, and other sporting goods products, and continue to buy their products while simultaneously judging them harshly for their child labor practices in the manufacturing of those same products. This brings us to moral utility theory. Moral utility theory is really the expected utility theory of economics reframed with a moral construct. There are generally 6 propositions that describe moral utility theory. First one, the brain estimates the utility of potential actions and chooses between ethical and unethical choices by comparing subjective expected utilities. Second, actions that violate moral norms have a low utility. Third, actions that satisfy moral norms have a higher utility. Fourth, unethical behavior emerges when the expected utility of behaving unethically is greater. Fifth, factors that increase the value of a goal, profit, for example, can motivate misbehavior by increasing the subjective expected utility. And sixth, moral reasoning occurs when no single behavior has a better subjective expected utility, meaning the outcome is ambiguous. We see then that subjective expected utility is equal to expectation times subjective utility. Let's look at some simple math now by examining subjective utility. In the table on slide 5, I subjectively assign a value between 1 and 10 to the outcomes of 3 decisions related to the sale of N95 medical mask across 3 different businesses areas of consideration: public perception, profit, and moral compass. In order to find the total subjective utility, we simply add together the values of the individual subjective utilities to find that donating the masks is clearly the best course of action, with business as usual second and price gouging last. However, this is not the whole story of moral utility theory. This shows only the subjective utility. We now have to add expectation or probability to the equation. We see here that each of these 3 outcomes has some expectation or probability of occurring in each decision. For example, if we choose to price gouge and sell the mask for $7 per mask, 80% of the time, or 80% of the people, our perception will be bad, a subjective utility of 1. 70% of the people, our public perception will be neither bad nor good, with a subjective utility of 5. And rest of 3% of people, perhaps our stockholders, our public perception will be high, with a subjective utility of 10. The same is true for our own moral compass, as there is some part of us, in this case 4%, that will feel good, a subjective utility of 10, if we maximize our profit and we can buy our kids that new bicycle or new video game or send them to expensive college. One note, profit is an objective utility in this model. That is, we are guaranteed to sell the mask so we know how much money we will receive. Therefore, the probability of receiving something other than $7 million if we price gouge is 0. The same is true for the other two courses of action as well. We then use the formula for subjective expected utility and multiply the expectation times the subjective utility. Because each of the probabilities are disjoint events, meaning they do not have any elements in common, or they both cannot happen at the same time, we can simply use the addition rule. We now see that the subjective expected utilities are different. While donating the mask is still the best course of action, price gouging now comes in a second, and business as usual is the worst course of action. So what happens if our morals and those of the public are not as well defined? In this case, we find that there is less variance in expectation for public perception and our own moral compass. When we do the math and find the subjective expected utility in this case, we find that price gouging is the preferred course of action. We have just uncovered why we see businesses make unethical choices. Let us examine the theory of moral expected utility by looking at contemporary case, that of Whole Foods. John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, wanted to develop a socially responsible company that equally catered to consumers, employees, and the environment. The end result was a business that sold organic, high-quality food and produce at somewhat higher prices. Mr. Mackey intuitively applied moral utility theory to find a balance between social responsibility, his internal utility, and consumer preferences, his external utility, to determine a market niche for penetration. Whole Foods is now a household name in the United States because there is a segment of the population that can afford the food. They value the social responsibility of the company and willing to pay premium for social good that his company espouses. Mr. Mackey, through the use of moral utility theory, discovered that business and capitalism are both fundamentally good and ethical. He discovered the balance between the level of social good and expectations of participants in the market exchange. In conclusion, morality plays a larger role in the contemporary marketplace, but moral reasoning is not always the answer to why businesses make the choices they make. In order to figure this out, we must look to something like a cost-benefit analysis. This is where moral utility theory is useful. Companies can use this framework to analyze the marketplace, develop alternative business models, and evaluate their probability of success based on both company and consumer expectations, just as Whole Foods did. Thank you.